This impressive piece is a life-size bronze head and torso of the Emperor Hadrian. He forbade the practice of Judaism, destroyed Jerusalem, and built pagan shrines on the site of the ruined temple. Such acts sparked the bloody Bar Kokhba revolt of 135 AD. Hadrian crushed it, thus dealing a serious blow to the hopes for Jewish independence from Rome. This fragmentary statue is one of the finest bronzes ever discovered in the Eastern Mediterranean. It seems ironic that this wonderful specimen, the embodiment of a prominent oppressor of the Jewish people, should find itself in a kind of benign captivity in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. Extremely lucky to have a series of inscribed fragments which are of extraordinary historical significance. And how can we remain unmoved in the presence of these most real, most sacred fragments of key figures and events in our distant past? The writing is Aramaic, and it marks the site of the reinterment of Uzziah, king of Judah, in the early 8th century. From the Book of Kings, we know that Uzziah was a leper, and in fact, the inscription says not to open. But rather than being a reference to his illness, this is no doubt a customary injunction against disturbing the dead. The script style dates this piece from the 2nd or 1st century BC, or perhaps during the reign of Herod the Great. The second inscribed fragment is a piece of a stone balcony. It was discovered at the southwest corner of Herod's temple, from whence it fell in 70 AD, dislodged by the Roman legions who sacked and buried the Second Temple and destroyed Jerusalem. We know from the rabbinical text, the Mishnah, that at this point in time, the priest on the Temple Mount customarily marked the beginning and close of the Sabbath by blasts of a trumpet. This stone, we believe, marked the place from which those trumpet calls were sounded. What's written on it is, "To the place of trumpeting." It is the only inscribed piece to survive from the Second Temple. And here is the third of the series of inscribed pieces. This is from a major Herodian site on the Mediterranean coast called Caesarea Maritima, a port and a major city of the Roman governors of Judea. This fragment is part of a dedication to Pontius Pilate, the Roman prefect of Judea, in AD 2636, who is traditionally believed to have authorized the execution of Christ. You can see the name Pilatus in the second line. We know Pilate from the New Testament, but this is the only physical proof we have of that historical personage. Scattered in the foreground of this next case are a group of silver shekels. 3 of them are inscribed with abbreviations signifying years 1 and 2 of the Jewish revolt against the Roman forces of 66 and 67 AD, which was, of course, brutally put down. Their dates, however, proclaim a spirit of defiance, because the Jews who struck these coins were dating to their own era and not referring to the Roman calendar. The next section of the exhibition represents the period from 324 AD, after Christianity was declared the official religion. This ended with the Arab conquest in 640 AD. It was a period of relatively peaceful coexistence between Jews and Christians, and churches and synagogues both flourished. These 2 oil lamps from the period, one Jewish, one Christian, vividly illustrate the most prototypical motifs of each culture. This large mosaic synagogue floor is one of the highlights of the exhibition. It's made of 3 sections, and it is 12 feet wide. It represents the interior of a synagogue. In the central panel is a gabled pediment with a chain hanging down supporting a perpetual light, which unfortunately has been destroyed. The green drapery has been drawn aside to reveal an inner shrine supported by 2 columns. A beaded, fringed curtain is suspended from a rod between them. Behind that curtain would have been the shrine or ark of the Torah. In the companion sections to the left and right are a number of other sacred objects: the shofar, or ram's horn, a square incense shovel, and a menorah, or seven-branched candelabrum. This elaborate mosaic occupied the apse of the synagogue, near where the objects depicted would have been used during the service. It dates from the early 6th century, and its motifs evoke certain rituals of the original temple, which had been destroyed nearly 500 years earlier. This marks the end of our exhibition chronologically. After 640 AD and the Arab conquest, a whole new era began. But we have one final gallery to explore. In it are two of the Dead Sea Scrolls, documents of immense importance to theologians and historians. They alone is a gesture of extraordinary generosity on the part of the State of Israel, and they form a most stirring coda to the exhibition. The first scrolls were discovered in 1946 or 47, accidentally, by a Bedouin shepherd. In about a dozen caves near the Dead Sea, over 800 manuscripts in Hebrew and Aramaic have since been discovered. Behind me, as if in the darkness of the cave, you'll discern the scrolls. These manuscripts turned out to be of immense significance because most of them are twice as old as the earliest known copies of the Hebrew Bible. They cover all of the books of the Old Testament, except the book of Esther, yet they differ in almost no details from the standard Hebrew Bible in use today. This is one of 14 scrolls found at Masada, the great rock fortress which rises above the western shore of the Dead Sea. Here, in about 30 BC, Herod the Great, who reigned in 37 to 4 BC, had built a luxurious palace and a citadel. About a century later, Masada became the last stronghold of the Jewish zealots seeking to resist the power of Rome. In 73 AD, 3 years after the final destruction of the temple, these intrepid believers were defeated after a long, heroic resistance. They had been besieged by the Roman 10th Legion. Rather than surrender to the Romans, the 960 defenders chose to commit suicide. Only 5 children and 2 old women remained alive, hidden in a cistern. Since these scrolls came from Masada, they could not possibly have been written after 73 AD. This one contains parts of the Book of Psalms and is almost identical with the later canonical text, which is in use today. One of the best preserved and longest scrolled is the Habakkuk commentary. It's nearly 7 feet long. The text is written in Aramaic block script. You'll see in the second line from the bottom 4 letters that are different from the rest. These 4 letters, known as the Tetragrammaton, are an archaic Hebrew script of the kind used prior to the Babylonian captivity. They are a respectful writing of the name of God. The people who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls have been identified as Essenes, one of the 3 branches of Judaism around the time of Christ, who himself may have spent time with them. The Essenes, who lived at Qumran on the shores of the Dead Sea, formed a celibate male community which lived in expectation of the Messiah, after which they anticipated the apocalypse and the destruction of the world. These scrolls, so distant in time and yet so close to the Hebrew Bible in use today, seem a fitting close to our exhibition. They epitomize the spiritual biography of the Jews, the people of the book, and convey strength of tradition and the depth of our connections to civilizations long past but not forgotten. This marks the end of our tour. I hope you have enjoyed this glimpse into the ancient civilizations of the Holy Land. I'm Phillip Demarbilo. Thank you for joining me.